Join me today for a retrospective look at the Halloween movie series. This is part one of potentially five. Welcome back. Those of you who've been here before, welcome those who are new to the channel. It's the Geek Cabal channel. My name's Bobby. And today, like I said, we're going to be covering the Halloween movie series. This series stretches back to 1978, which is when Halloween Part 1 came out, which at the time was just Halloween. There was no Part 1. And I'll get to that distinction here in just a moment. But overall, there are 13 movies in the Halloween series, and as I go along with my explanation here, you're going to understand why I want to break this up into several videos. Like I said, probably five, and the logic behind that I'm going to explain here in just a moment. But I'm going to talk about Halloween 1 first, because that's where everything starts and the building blocks of the rest of the series. So it was made by John Carpenter, who has made a number of horror films. If you folks have somehow never seen them, you should pretty well watch all of them. You've got Christine, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King novel about a killer car. The Thing, which is excellent on pretty well every front. Uh, and as a funny side note about that, the score for that some of the music is also used in The Hateful Eight, Quentin Tarantino's movie. The same gentleman scored both. I believe it's Enrico Maricone. I unfortunately don't know, his first name right off the top of my head, but it's Maricone. And the score for The Thing, like, basically no acknowledgement, no nothing. Puts the same music in The Hateful Eight, wins an Academy Award. So there you go. No one really cares about horror movie themes, apparently, even though one of the most iconic ones is from Halloween. John Carpenter actually wrote that. He writes the music to a lot of his movies, The Thing being, I think, one of the exceptions. Yeah, but he wrote the music to Halloween. The main theme carries over into Halloween 2. I don't know if he did the rest of the music for Halloween 2, but he did do the music for Halloween 3, which is kind of interesting, and we'll get to that. So, probably altogether, we're going to be covering the first three movies in this. And like I said, I'm going to explain why I'm covering which movies and which videos here. So, like I said, John Carpenter, I believe, wrote and directed, and there's obviously several people in the movie. It's got a full cast, but the two primary people you need to be concerned with are Donald Pleasance, who plays, excuse me, who plays Dr. Samuel Loomis, and Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays Laurie Strode. Now, this was Donald Pleasance at the time. He was the kind of, I don't want to say the talent, but he's the similar to how Alec Guinness in Star Wars is the veteran actor on set playing the more esteemed role, but has less screen time. That's basically Donald Pleasance's role here. Although unlike Obi-Wan Kenobi, he survives through most of these movies. So, uh, but Jamie Lee Curtis, this was like her big breakout performance. She was in a few TV shows before this, but this was her first movie. Although one of the shows she was in was Columbo, and if any of you have ever seen those, the episodes of Columbo are basically feature length. So, it wasn't her first feature length production, but it was the first actually released in a theater. And Jamie Lee Curtis went on to become known as a scream queen because of this, although she is in some other horror movies as well. And she has the lineage for it. Her mom is Janet Leigh, who was in, among other movies, Psycho from Alfred Hitchcock, and she also we'll get around to her in a later video in this series because she also does pop up as a cameo in one of the later movies. And then her dad is Tony Curtis, so she came from a known Hollywood background. Which is probably why, whenever it came time to do her wardrobe, they literally gave her $20 and said, "Go to J.C. Penney's or Sears to buy it." Basically like, "Hey, you're the same age as the character in the movie. Basically, like, what do people of this age wear? Like, we're not going to pretend like we know. We're Hollywood types. Just go buy it yourself. And, they trusted her because of her background. So, yeah. Now, the first Halloween movie is not as not as gruesome as people think it is. In fact, I'm relatively certain there are only 5 people get killed in the entire movie, and for the most part, not in overly gruesome manners. Uh, yeah, I believe 2 of them are choked to death. Uh, One guy gets stabbed. One guy, you don't even see him get killed; you just see his body. And I don't know offhand how the other person buys the farm, because I'm drawing a blank on them. But anyway, but the funny thing is, I have seen a video that compares the body counts of the main, like, the big 3 horror movie stalkers, which are Michael Myers, he's the gentleman here in Halloween, Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th series, and Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. And Michael Myers, like, has the highest body count by far. Now, it helps that he has 13 movies compared to, let's see, it'd be 10, 11, 12 for Jason. So Jason's actually close on movie front. But Freddy, I think, only has 8 movies, unless I'm forgetting one. Uh, and there's overlap between Freddy and Jason in Freddy versus Jason. But what it comes down to is Michael Myers, at various points in the movies, literally just kills everyone he comes across. Doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter, like, what or anything. It's like, you get in his path, you're going to die. Jason tends to only go after the campers at the camp, which limits the number of people he goes after. And Freddy tops out at like 6 people in most of his movies because he's targeting like a very specific group of people in each movie. Freddy also has a whole lot of people that get away. Michael Myers, not so much. So, very high body count, but that comes in the later movies. That starts in the second movie, for reasons that I'm going to get into here. So the first movie was a financial success. It's was very didn't cost a lot to make, and it really just took off at the box office. So originally, John Carpenter did not intend for there to be a sequel to this movie, even though the movie ends on what appears to be a cliffhanger because Dr. Loomis shoots Michael Myers. And I suppose I should tell you, like, I'm going to be spoiling all these movies. So, hopefully you watched a movie that came out 45 years ago. So, it comes down to a final confrontation. Michael Myers is trying to kill Lori. He has already killed everyone at the house across the street, which is a couple of her friends. And she goes over to check it out. She finds all their bodies. Then Michael tries to kill her and chases her back across the street. She's babysitting a couple of kids. And so he shows up and she gets in a few hits, but he's getting ready to deliver the coup de grace. And then Dr. Loomis shows up and unloads a revolver into him. And the last shot sends him sailing over out a set of doors on the top floor and over the balcony and into the backyard. Dr. Loomis goes, looks out, sees him there on the ground, apparently dead, comes back, comforts Lori as much as he can, and then goes out and sees that he's gone. And the theme to the movie starts playing, and you start seeing the perspective from Michael Myers' perspective again, and you hear the breathing behind the mask and everything. And so, he's obviously not dead. Now, this was not meant as a setup to a sequel. This was meant because Michael Myers represents the inevitability of death. That's why he's just slow and plodding and murders everything in his path because he's inevitable. It's not, he's a metaphor. Similar to how, like, George Romero tried to make a statement about capitalism in Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, you can look at the surface level of, hey, a shopping mall would be a good place to hide potentially in a zombie attack, but also, like, there's a lot of commentary about capitalism there too. So you have the same thing here with Michael Myers. That's why he's just slow and mechanical, and then once he gets a hold of you, like, there's no escape. And so that's just one of the little things about the movie. So some little details. The mask that Michael Myers wears is a William Shatner mask. I've heard alternatively that it is from uh, the movie Incubus, which has the distinction of one of the only movies that's filmed in the language known as Esperanto, or it's from possibly a Star Trek episode. I've heard both things. I'm not sure which one it is, but it's literally a William Shatner mask, spray painted white, and then the eye holes have been enlarged a little bit. So, William Shatner, face of evil. And the first movie Michael Myers comes across as stronger than average, but in the later movies, he's definitely like superhumanly strong. And this, I mean, that's the way horror movies go. It's escalation. So, like I said, very low body count. Um, a lot of the movie is it's a lot of like suspenseful build up to the murders towards the end. Although it does open with Michael Myers as like an 8-year-old kid killing his older sister. That's who it was. That's the other victim I forgot. But again, she gets stabbed repeatedly by him, and you don't really see much. You know, so a lot of it's some of it's in your mind, not quite to the level of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's close. Some people do believe that the first Halloween movie is the beginning of the slasher genre, and they're wrong. I believe it's the movie The Town That Dreaded Sundown, but the point being, it's definitely a movie from like a decade before Halloween. Halloween does have was I think more widely known, and part of the distinction is you see a lot of the movie. You see several scenes from Michael Myers' perspective, which you typically didn't see that. Like you don't like in Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 4 years before that. You don't see shots from Leatherface's perspective. You see Leatherface running around with a chainsaw, and so there's a different approach there, and it's one that carries through to the other Halloween movies. There's a few Italian horror movies use that perspective. One of them is Suspiria, which I should definitely do some videos on that trilogy of movies at some point. Dario Argento and his witches movies, they're something else. So so like I said, the first Halloween, you have that perspective shot in several moments, and like I said, Michael Myers in general is just this slow mechanical, no escaping him though kind of deal. And yeah, so that was what John Carpenter's going for. He had the kind of techno-y score that he concocted that has the riff that everyone knows. So at the end, he's like, okay, well, on to the next project. And the producer, who I believe the producer for all of these was Mustafa Akkad up to a certain point. He unfortunately was killed in a terrorist attack at a wedding he was attending, I believe in Turkey, several years ago. But he wanted to make another movie. His first one was wildly successful, and John Carpenter agreed, as I understand it, agreed to come back on the idea that this will be the last one. It will have a definitive ending, and so they agreed. And a lot of the kills in the second one are very graphic as opposed to the first movie. The first movie, like a lot of it's kind of in the dark and everything. The second movie takes place largely in a hospital. It's the same night because Michael Myers escaped at the end of the movie. Laurie gets taken to the hospital. She's in like a drug induced coma through most of the movie. So Jamie Lee Curtis isn't in most of the second movie. A lot of it is Michael Myers. He kills a few random people just walking around the neighborhood and then kind of sets the police on a diversion. Then he goes to the hospital and starts just killing everybody at the hospital. And this is where you start to see more of the like super strong Michael Myers, where like at one point he stabs someone in the back with a scalpel and with one arm lifts them about a foot and a half off the floor. So yeah, at that point you're talking superhuman strength. And there's a break resistant glass door that's locked. He doesn't even bother with the handle. He just walks through the door shattering it as he goes through. So these are feats of superhuman strength at that point, and also regenerative abilities towards the end. So, like I said, most of it's in the hospital. Definitely more gruesome deaths. Well, I suppose I could explain most of them. Let's see. One woman gets drowned in a hot tub, but he had like turned up the heat. So as he keeps sticking her in there, like the heat's like melting her face on top of drowning her. One guy, um, there was a nurse that he like, I think tied down to a bed and stuck an IV in her arm and just opened it up. So she just bled out. And a guy comes across her and like the lights are off, so he doesn't see the giant pool of blood. And he slips and bashes the back of his head against the concrete. One doctor gets, I believe, stabbed in both of his eyes with IV needles. They find him in his chair. The security guard gets killed by having his head hit in with a hammer several times. And yeah, just all kinds of really gruesome stuff in the second one. The body count is way higher. The carnage is higher. Like I said, it was a matter of Carpenter agreed to make this the last one, so they just went over the top with things. And it culminates in the big finale where Michael Myers, Dr. Loomis, and Laurie Strode are all in the operating room, and Laurie Strode shoots Michael Myers through both of his eyes and blinds him. Doesn't kill him, but blinds him. And so he operates on sound and just starts swinging around wildly with a scalpel. And Dr. Loomis and Laurie begin opening up the valves on the oxygen and ether tanks all over the room because it's an operating room. And Laurie escapes. Michael Myers gets up to Dr. Loomis, and I don't remember exactly what he says. It's not quite "see you in hell," but it's something. And he has a lighter in his hand and flicks the lighter, and kaboom! Then you see Michael Myers come out of the burning wreckage, fall over in the hallway, and just sit there and cook. And unlike the first movie, like he doesn't get back up. We're definitely supposed to believe he's dead here, along with Dr. Loomis, because he's merely mortal. But as we get to part four, you find out that neither one of them died there. So, but they were both obviously meant to die there. And, it's just one of those things, because like I said, John Carpenter operated under the assumption that this was going to be the last movie. Then there's a few other like little details here and there, like uh, he's referred to as the boogeyman a couple times throughout the first movie, mainly by this little kid that Laurie is babysitting. Like he sees him at one point, and he's like, "Oh, Laurie, like the boogeyman's across the street," and she's like, "What does the boogeyman even look like?" Because it's not like the kid knows. And so at the end of the movie, right after Dr. Loomis shoots him, is the first movie. She's like, in tears, and all of her friends are dead across the street. She just survived being killed by a psychopath. And she's like, "Was that the boogeyman?" And Dr. Loomis says, "Yes, I believe it was." So, along with that, at the end of the second movie, the song "Mr. Sandman" begins to play, and that comes into play like much later in the series. But it's another kind of idea that kind of plays into the boogeyman motif and everything. So, the first two movies are a cohesive narrative that you watch them back to back, and it's one night, one cohesive thing, and you could just stop there. Some people would advise that you should stop there, uh, but the series did not. Now, while they were filming the second movie, they also filmed extra scenes to make a TV cut of the first movie. And a lot of people actually like the TV cut because, like I said, the kills aren't very graphic in the first movie, so they don't have to cut a whole lot out, but they put extra stuff in. And it's actually gotten its own video release on DVD and I think Blu-ray. And I want to say there's a version that actually combines everything. It leaves everything they had to cut, but also puts the extra scenes from the TV version in. And they filmed those while they were filming Halloween Part 2. And I want to say they filmed that originally for NBC. So it's worth checking out too, by the way. I don't remember right off the top of my head what the extra scenes were, but I have seen it. It's been several years. So, second movie was also quite successful. However, they didn't have John Carpenter, and Mustafa Akkad intended on sticking to his word, but he had the Halloween name. So the idea was, let's make an anthology series. We'll just use the Halloween name and just make other horror things. And that's where this lovely thing that Jim has provided for us over here comes in. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Michael Myers is not in this movie. Okay, that's technically inaccurate. Michael Myers is not a new character or an existing character in this movie. In the background in this movie, Halloween is a movie on TV. So there are some scenes of Michael Myers, but it's on a TV. And that's also their subtle way of sneaking in the theme from Halloween 1 into Halloween 3. Now, John Carpenter did do the main theme, though, for Halloween 3 and some of the other work for it, as far as the music front, because he believed that there weren't going to be other movies. So he's like, yeah, sure, I do music for movies. Why not? And so Halloween 3 is a wild trip. We have robots that look human, of course. Uh, we have Halloween masks that at midnight are, I don't think it's midnight. I don't remember what time it is, and I should know because they say it a bazillion times in the movie. But the Halloween masks are going to kill the children that are wearing them in a mass sacrifice, similar to what the Druids used to do centuries ago. And it involves one of the rocks from Stonehenge and magic and all kinds of just bizarre things. It is completely bonkers and off the rails compared to the other two. And this one, we have Tom Atkins is our main guy, and there's a few other people. I can't think of the gentleman's name, but he's the guy who heads OCP in the first two RoboCop movies. He runs the Silver Shamrock Magic, not Magic, Shamrock mask company that makes the Halloween masks for the kids. And yeah, so the whole thing starts like a guy getting killed. No, he's in a car accident. He comes to the hospital where Tom Atkins is a doctor. Then another guy comes in and kills him, just like crushes his skull with his bare hand. Then he himself goes out into the parking lot, pours gasoline all over himself, and sets himself on fire. And you find out later he's a robot. So Tom Atkins begins to go look into it, and you find out that there's this company manufacturing these masks, and there's a little medallion on it. It's got little bits and pieces of one of the rocks from Stonehenge, and there's going to be a signal sent out on TV that's going to activate the magic in it, and it's going to be bad. So, yeah, this movie is all over the place. It's just a glorious mess. You should definitely check it out. Just don't expect Michael Myers. So, that's pretty much the summation of the first three movies. Now, the reason I'm going to break it off here is because the Halloween series is in a unique situation. It's basically a choose your own ending kind of story. Because you have multiple paths that you can follow throughout these movies. You can just go Halloween 1 and 2 and just be done with it. You can, 3 is entirely up to you. It has nothing to do with any of the others. It's just kind of out there. But again, you should watch it. It's great. But then from 1 and 2, you can go to 4, 5, and 6. That's kind of one narrative path through these movies. 4, 5, and 6 assume the events of 1 and 2 took place and some other things, and then they occur. Or you can go with Halloween 7 and 8, which are known as Halloween H2O, which is 20, not water, because it's the 20th anniversary, and Resurrection, I believe, is Halloween 8. Those two pretend like 4, 5, and 6 didn't happen. They all pretend like 3 didn't happen, so I'm going to stop mentioning it. So those two, their timeline is 1, 2, 7, and 8. Then you have the two Rob Zombie movies, which are off on their own little thing. And then you have the 3 more recent ones, which the first one's just known as Halloween, and then Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Those assume that the first movie took place, possibly the second, but it definitely like rebuts, it retcons something from the second movie. So yeah, you have different options, different paths to take through the series, and so the other videos are going to chart the other pathways that you can take instead of just covering them all in one series. So what you want to do is watch this one, which hopefully you are at this point, and then choose your own ending, essentially. Yeah. So that one little tidbit of information, by the way, in Halloween 2, you find out that Laurie Strode is actually Michael Myers' sister. After he killed his older sister, she was put up for adoption because I'm going to guess his parents probably got divorced after that. So yeah. Now the Rob Zombie interpretation is a little bit different. His parents died, so but same concept. And then, and like I said, one of the newer ones, they kind of rebut that and kind of go with Laurie Strode was just like the next person he came across. So it's an interesting take, and we'll talk more about it once we get to those because the last one definitely goes some different places than the others, and I definitely give it credit for that. A lot of people didn't like it because of that, but I wanted something new, and it went there. So anyway, that's basically it for the first three movies. If you like slasher movies and you haven't seen this somehow, definitely check it out. First Halloween is quite possibly, I don't know if it's my favorite horror movie, but it's definitely my favorite slasher. And it's probably like top five, with the rest probably being various zombie movies, which hopefully we'll also talk about a little bit this month. It's Halloween month, spooky month. I don't know where that name came from, but apparently everyone's using it now, so we will too. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this and definitely wait for the others to check them out. We're going to try to get them all out before Halloween or culminating on Halloween. We'll see how that works out. Best laid plans and all that. But otherwise, I want to thank you folks for listening. For those of you who've been here for a while, we always appreciate the fact you have folks who subscribe and keep listening. And if you're new, we appreciate, subscriptions. It's YouTube. You know how that all works. But especially comments and sharing. That's what we really like because we want feedback from you guys. Uh, like we're going to keep doing what we want to do, but also if there's a better way to do it or if there's something adjacent to it that you guys want to hear, of course we'll indulge that as well. So, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. You know how it works. But otherwise, I don't know. Oh, what would be a good send off here? Maybe trick or treat. Maybe best I got. Sorry, I'm not a comedian. Jim's much better at this. I'm not. So anyway, thanks again for listening, and watch out for the boogeyman out there.